Hello, good afternoon to everyone. We'll get going in a few seconds. Still waiting for a few more people. In the meantime, thanks for joining in for the first ever Standards Academy workshop for SMEs from the StandICT consortium. A few more people in the lobby. Okay, so thanks a lot for joining. My name is Alexander Choureau. I'm a tech policy officer at the European Digital SME Alliance and a partner in the StandICT.eu project. And I'm accompanied today by some brilliant colleagues of mine. And the aim for today is to gather a few insights on how to develop leadership capacity for SMEs in European and international standardization organizations. So we have a little over an hour. I hope we can make some valuable use of that time and that this will be something you take away with you. Before we get going, a quick reminder that this event is being organized in partnership with Small Business Standards. So you can see the logo at the top of the screen. I'm assuming that many of you here today probably know of them. For those who don't, Small Business Standards are an organization representing small and medium enterprises in standardization processes in Europe. And this week, they're kicking off their first ever edition of Meeting Standards from the 14th to the 21st of November. And they have many other events of this kind, focusing on SMEs and standards. So if you're interested in it, I recommend you look into the website at the end of this workshop. Now, with this said, let's get the workshop going. Ideally, we would have liked to do this in person to be able to meet different people, have direct interactions. Obviously, getting companies from every side of Europe, as you can imagine, is a bit difficult. So we had to revolve to an online format, but we still want to make the best of it. And this is why we've given the possibility to every participant to speak freely with no constraints. So we encourage you all to share your thoughts, to share your questions, and also perhaps specific needs based on your company's specific sector or profile. And we hope that by this way, we're able to get a good conversation going between the experts we have here today and the rest of the audience. As a last opening point, and I feel a bit like a school teacher saying this, and I'm not too happy about it, I'd like to insist that we should still be mindful of the overall flow of the workshop in order to keep it manageable for all. So I'd please ask you to keep your mics muted at all times if you're not speaking. And if you want to take the floor, please raise your hand first, and then I can give you the floor, and then we can hear what you have to say and get the conversation going. So I'll put down my teacher's hat for now. I'll give it back to some of my colleagues a bit later, perhaps. And let's get this going. So just changing the screen. Yes. So why are we here today? Why is StandICT delving into this connection with SMEs? I think these are important points to get started on before getting on with the rest of the workshop. SMEs have always been an important target audience for the StandICT consortium, but even more so since this year, so 2023, when we've had a new iteration of the project, extending it until 2026. And we've put together a standardization training strategy this summer in which SMEs hold a central aspect. So essentially, we believe that standardization training should go beyond the only university level and also integrate the workplace through lifelong learning. So the main message we want to carry out today, and we hope that you've joined for this reason, is to highlight why it's important for SMEs to engage in standard setting and underline the modalities behind taking up leadership roles in technical committees and working groups in standardization bodies. And today we have, as I was mentioning, a good set of experts who have been working with leadership positions in technical committees for quite a few years now, who are here to share their insights, share some tips, share some guidance, and hopefully you can take away some important messages with you. Maybe one quick presentation of StandICT for those who are joining for the first time and who are not too accustomed with the project. So this is a very comprehensive slide. I do not expect you to remember or even look into all of it, but maybe a few key messages to understand what we do as a project. So StandICT's central goal is basically and essentially to bolster the European ICT standardization ecosystem. And it does this through different ways. The main one is through the managing of a fellowship program with close to 3 million euros in funding, which is delivered to European experts participating in standardization over 36 months, so until 2026, and through 9 different open calls. And I think it's important to stress that you are all encouraged to apply for this funding, SMEs in particular. And we hope that today you're able to get a bit of guidance on how to do so, to feel perhaps a bit more encouraged in applying for this funding opportunity. StandICT has also established an EU observatory on ICT standardization with different technical working groups focusing on various topical fields of standardization. And the idea behind this is to empower different contributions from ICT standardization experts in Europe and then to gather expertise. Finally, and I think this is what brings us here today, one of the strong components of the StandICT projects is to train the next generation of ICT standardization experts in Europe and engage with different national standardization bodies, with PPPs through the project's standards education group. And one of my colleagues, Knut Blinds, who's joining us as speaker today, will say a bit more about this in a few minutes. Maybe just finishing on the whole SME parts of the StandICT project. StandICT engages with SMEs with 3 main axes, let's say. The first one is the SME leadership workshops, which today is the initial kickoff. We hope they are valuable and that we can repeat them with more participants and in a different format and maybe even in person at some point. But the idea, as I've expressed a bit earlier already, is to get some SMEs who have some expertise in standardization processes to come and discuss, to come and share some tips, some guidance to other companies who are a bit less experienced in that domain. The second main thing we're focusing on at StandICT is facilitating SME access to training modules, which are put forward by StandICT. And I know that my colleague Knut, who I've mentioned before, will be talking about these modules a bit later in the workshop. And last but not least, something that we intend to kick off in a few weeks/months, but which is not yet active, is the initiation of an SME mentorship program. So the idea, simply put, is to put returning experts of the fellowship program of StandICT who have been benefiting from funding from StandICT for a few years now, perhaps, to put them in contact with new applicants, mostly SMEs who have a bit less experience, and to give them a bit of guidance on the whole process and how to get engaged in the work that you're doing. So even though, of course, by the end of this workshop, we hope you'll all be absolute experts in all the intricacies behind the work in technical committees and standardization bodies, if you need some more support, if you need some more guidance, we have some means under StandICT to support you if this is something you would like to do. So I'll get onto the agenda just after this, but I think it's important to insist on this. If you have any questions and if you want any support about getting engaged under StandICT, feel free to come towards me at the end of the meeting or even ask the question directly at the end, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So introducing now our brilliant speakers and getting to the agenda of today's workshop. We have 3 speakers with us, all with different perspectives, but quite interrelated as well. We'll first hear from my colleague Knut Blinds, who's Head of Business Unit Innovation and Regulation at Fraunhofer in Germany, and who's also a partner in the StandICT project. And Knut will give us some insights on the education and skills activities under StandICT and how these relate in particular to SMEs as well and what they can get out of them. After this, we'll hear from 2 experts who are SMEs, who are experts financed by small business standards, as I mentioned in the introduction, who is co-organizing this event with us. So we'll have Belen Suarez, who's convener of Working Group 5 on governance at ISO TC 307 on blockchain and DLTs, and who's also the convener of Working Group 2 on environmental sustainability at StandICT JTC 19, also on blockchain and DLTs. And Belen has many other hats, which were too numerous to name, but I'm sure she can say a bit more about herself when she talks to you a bit later. And last but not least, we will have Andrea Ketcher, who is chairman of StandICT JTC 19 on blockchain and DLTs, and also chairman of SENS TC 434 on electronic invoicing. Before we get going, as mentioned at the beginning, we want to make the best of this small format of a workshop by facilitating direct participation between the participants and all people attending with the speakers as well. So at any point, if you have a question, if you have something to share, please raise your hands and I'll give you the floor and we can get the conversation going this way. We also have a small interactive part planned during the Q&A. So we'd love to hear a bit more about yourselves, about the companies you represent, about your specific needs perhaps, and this can help us tailor the discussion a bit more and maybe have some more specific guidance from the speakers we have here today. With this introduction out of the way, I'll leave the floor to our first speaker, Knut. So Knut, if you could please give us a bit more insight on the Standards Academy of StandICT, the work we're doing, how this relates to SMEs, what they can take away from it. I think this would be a great way of getting the workshop kicking. So I'll stop sharing my screen for now, Knut, and if you want to project your slides directly, you can do so in a few seconds. In the meantime, thanks again for joining, and we hope you have a pleasant workshop.
Hello, everybody. You see my screen?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, for the introduction to my small part. Yeah, we are also partner of StandICT, and I'm responsible for the academy. And in this context, I will guide you a little bit through what we are going to plan. And I'm also quite interested to hear later the other presentations to see whether we should or adjust our plan a little bit according to the needs of SMEs. And Alex already has shown in this slide, and this is the overall kind of overview of the different objectives and activities and targets of StandICT 26. And one is the objective 4 to build the ICT Standards Academy to support the next generation of EU standardization experts. This is challenging because we have two trends. We have a demographic trend, which is also hitting the experts in the standardization kind of organizations and committees, and therefore we will see several a significant share of them to retire quite soon. That's one aspect. The other one is we have a high dynamics in new technologies, and all these new technologies require new experts, also in standardization, and therefore this is the motivation for this objective. Overall, we try to reach around 1,000 people attending our events, including this one, and we start with 6, or the plan is to have 6 teaching modules. I will talk in a minute about that. Now, we delivered an action plan to the European Commission in August. Before we had a first workshop on education about standardization in Aachen at the Standards researchers conference, and then based on that we submitted this document. In parallel, the activities are accompanied by an advisory board, which has met then the first time on September 5th, and will also then reach one in December. What we did so far is to screen what's already there regarding teaching material, and there's a lot, but also a lot is outdated. And also in the previous project, there was already a collection kind of done. And based on this, and also to structure a little bit what we are going to kind of deliver. At the end, we propose these 6 modules, but we are definitely open to adjust them. That means it's about the general role of standards in ICT, which is the basic. Then we will also guide the people through the quite complex ICT standardization landscape, because they are not only kind of the well-known European international standards bodies, but it's also a little bit more. Then we have also to look at the interface to research and innovation, because here a lot of standardization activities, and as you will hear the speakers later, they are focused on blockchain. It means also a quite new emerging technology, therefore confirming that the link to research and innovation is quite key. And a specific topic in standardization, especially in the area of ICT, is also the link to patents. The hot topic of standard essential patents will be covered then in the 4th module for the intermediate level. Even one step further is to address and kind of a little bit guide through this very ambivalent relationship between standardization and open source, but this is very important and key. And the last one is a little bit open. On the one hand, we might have one webinar and one material on geopolitics, about technological sovereignty. Owen is one example, and probably not all, and we will also address specific technologies like AI and blockchain. Therefore, I'm also quite keen to hear the other speakers later about their experiences, and maybe also recommendations which we might consider to reflect in what we are doing in the future. And we might also offer micro interventions, maybe like this one. Overall, we will have PDFs or PowerPoint slides plus a short synopsis of the topics with links also to other materials. And this will be then kicked off next year, where we will run these webinars, also maybe in collaboration with another partner at StandICT, the Open Forum Europe, because here we already had some common experience, which was quite positive, and overall we want to reach 1,000 participants. I'm quite open to get some insights what target groups we should consider, and here SMEs are certainly also a specific target group, and here the collaboration with digital SME is important. We will also involve well-known guest speakers, because they have maybe also provide some stories and insights and experiences from the practice. Then the webinars will be promoted. We also have to align that with some other project. Booster is one, and there will be a specific project, Horizon project, on education about standardization. In the long term, we have to consider how to continue that, maybe in the follow-up project, but also in collaboration with other kind of European standard organization and their plans. Especially ETSI has some active education kind of agenda, but we might also consider other higher education institutions and public research organizations in Europe, plus other partners. That's a little bit the action plan. Last point, I want to misuse my last minute here is to point to the European Standardization Panel, which is a pilot activity supported by DG Research and Innovation of the European Commission. And this is an opportunity also for SMEs to get your voice to the table. also in a global context, but also maybe if we get sufficient information per country, also at the national level. And finally, you can also provide some insights or ideas how to maybe improve the interface between research funding and standardization activities. Therefore, maybe just make a photo of the QR code and then you can get access to the survey. And that's it from my side. I hope I was in time, but I'm also open to answer questions during the webinar. Thank you.
Very timely, Knut. Thanks a lot. I suggest we move on to Belen, perhaps before taking the first round of questions and reactions. But I think this was a great way of getting the discussion started, and also to highlight that there is some support, there is some means under StandICT in terms of gathering knowledge, gathering expertise for SMEs who want to get engaged into standardization. So this brings me now to Belen Suarez, who I've presented in the introduction, but I'm sure she can say a few more words about herself, who is an SME participating in standardization, who is a convener in 2 different working groups in standardization bodies, and therefore has quite a lot of experience to share with us today on what it means to take these leadership positions and what sort of work it entails. So Belen, I'll share the screen for you, and then you can get going.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Thank you very much to the Digital SME Alliance for inviting me to this event and to share with you my experience, not only working as convener, but also participating as expert on several topics, and not only on technical standard, that it is an input also for the previous presentation. I think that could be very valuable for all the ecosystem, and especially for SMEs, if we not only think on technical aspect, also on how this the innovation created for these technical standards could be developed also from the management point of view. So thank you very much for the invitation and for opening the opportunity to discuss. In my case, to speak about the importance of engaging in standard settings for SMEs. So next slide, please. When we analyze why one SMEs could be engaged on a standard, I would like also always emphasize one fundamental fact: is a standard creates market. And also a standard disrupt value chains, disrupt industries, and maybe disrupt future markets. So in my view, the decision to participate on a standard development should be considered a fundamental strategic decision for any organization regarding what is the competitive position they want to play in the market. So SMEs need to compete. Obviously, SMEs need to defend their strategic position and, if possible, improve, maybe growth in the market. And to do this, obviously, they are using now standard published because on digital scope, for instance, with a high level of changes, high speed of changes, is needed not only to collaborate with the stakeholder, but most of the technologies, in case of blockchain, for instance, should be developed in collaborative manner and along the value chain. So they need to have a common language between different stakeholders. We need to have a systematic understanding and minimum requirements to facilitate the collaboration in this innovation development. Obviously, this minimum requirement could allow to compare between different stakeholders, different solutions, and at the end, looking for interoperability and integrability of the different stakeholder solution in the value chain. But this is only regarding when the standard is published. But before it is published, the standard have to be developed. And in this process is a key moment in where SMEs could exploit a competitive advantage for this market creation. And in my view, when I ask other SMEs why you are not engaged on standard development or why you could be, most of the criteria are based, which is a good idea, on cost-benefit consideration. So what is the cost of participating on a standard setting and the benefit I could obtain? And there is a fundamental gap, because normally the costs are supported or are suffered in the short term, And normally the benefits are better understood in the medium and the long term. So we have there normally a gap. However, in my view, this assessment should be complemented not only to think on what is the cost of action to participate on a standard. My question is, what is the cost of inaction? So what is the cost of not participating in this market creation? And what are the missed benefit, the opportunity lost to avoid exploit the opportunity to lead and to be proactive in this market creation? And it is something very critical, not only for SMEs, also is critical from the ecosystem perspective, because in the industry, we have to analyze that the 95%, more of 95% of the whole industry are SMEs, and more of the 80% are a small organization. So if we analyze the composition of technical committees, it is clear the underrepresentation of SMEs point of view. So that means that this market creation and these opportunities, competitive advantage to be the first in this market creation is only on the shoulder of a small percentage of the market. So it is compromising not only the single market, it is compromising in some cases the competition we are facing on industry. So it is why it's so important to encourage SMEs participate and exploit these opportunities. And I could say that it's not only possible to think that there is benefit on the short term, also in the long term, sorry. In the short term, there is also significant benefit, because when organizations are thinking on innovate or improve the current portfolio of products and services, in the short term, they have to, for instance, discuss the ideas, exploit ideas, develop innovation. So participate on a standard is a very good opportunity to learn and discuss ideas with key stakeholders on your industry. It could be coming from the academia, it could be large organization, could be consultant working mostly for a large organization, even public institution. All of them are in the standardization processes. So it's a very good opportunity to discuss with them, and even networking, thinking on potential future key alliance with key partners needed for develop your solutions. Also to gain recognition and reputation in the industry, fundamentally from customer. When one organization is taking an active and leading role in create knowledge from a standard, also assurance and look for that the standard really meets market needs, but also SMEs needs and expectation, and remain vigilant of future standards, but also on future regulation, because in some cases the standards are informing new regulation. That is the case of the digital product passport, that later I will comment a bit more about. And at the end is to have an influence capacity on the market, the future market, on legal requirement. And in my view, is the fundamental question is not if you can participate or not on a standard development, is do you want to lead the market? What is the position you are looking for? You want to be a leader or you want to be a follower? You have to exploit in a proactive manner the opportunities to participate on a standard, or you have to adapt and mitigate the negative impact the standard could represent in your organization. So it is regarding to the why. So in case your reply is positive, then the SMEs decide to participate. Please, next slide. Then the next question should be how you can participate. Normally, when SMEs can participate on a standard by reaching the national standardization bodies, so they can be engaged in one concrete scope, or by participating in liaison organization, as is the case of the Small Business Standard and the Digital SME Alliance, both very, very active at the European and international level. And they can play a different role. They can be only expert participating in the discussion, but also they can be convener. And convener is a very, in my view, is a very privileged position for SMEs. The convener at the end is who lead the development in the technical committee, obviously with the support of the team leaders and also the secretariat and the international expert engaged in the discussion. But the convener have a very, very good position because they are focused on reach consensus, and especially that this consensus should be include or should be avoid create negative impact in key stakeholder, in that case on SMEs. So if we are thinking how a standard could support SME viewpoint, it's a very good position, a very good role to play in order to mitigate the potential negative impact and expand the positive impact of a standard on SMEs target group. Obviously, the convener have to develop some administrative tasks, monitoring, and ensures the progress of the work program, also document all the decision and the discussion with the support of the secretariat, monitor new requirements or technical requirements for standard development. And the last but not the least, in my view, it is engaged or especially focused on stakeholder engagement, especially liaison organization, not only the national bodies, but what are the key liaison organizations are working, participating, contributing to one concrete working group. So all of them, in my view, are a very good opportunity. Obviously, there is some obstacles. So in case of consensus, for instance, could be an opportunity, but also it's a threat, because at the end, you need to have the consensus of the most of the technical committee in order to be nominated. Obviously, how or the process to reach this consensus sometimes is difficult, especially when there is opposite position, how to manage geopolitical situation between national committees, and how to balance between the different perspectives. Could be large organization on SMEs. But in any case, at the end, it's very, very well positioned in order to support SMEs participation and also exploit opportunities. This is why, please, next slide, Alex. I am very happy to be, as Alex mentioned, to be convener on ISO, on Working Group 5 in the scope of blockchain and DLT of the governance working group, also at the European level on SENELEC, in the working group related to the environmental sustainability. So it is why I mentioned before that we should not only to think on technical requirement, but also other consideration as the environmental impact, but also the social impact we could create with this standard and in this new market. I am also expert on innovation management. So how we can manage this innovation in systematic manner is a significant point to be considered on environmental management. And at the European level, I am also engaged as a representative of the SPS on the digital product passport. The digital product passport, some of you maybe know about, sure will be a significant source of innovation in the next years, and could represent a significant impact, not only at the European level, not only at the value chains, European value chain, I could say, at the global value chain. So it's a big area, complex area of a standard, and I invite all of you to support SPS, the Digital SME Alliance, but be engaged, more active, because for the moment there is underrepresentation of SMEs' point of view, and as a consequence, under exploitation of the great opportunity it could represent. So thank you very much. I am open to reply any questions you could have.
Thanks a lot, Belen. And yeah, I think we should maybe take a first round of questions from the audience before moving on to Andrea. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I can give you the floor. But maybe just before people come up with some thoughts, going back to the proactive side you were talking about, and from working with Belen quite a lot in the last few months, I can definitely tell, and Belen is always on the front foot. And I think this gives results as well, because this is how you then meet institutional stakeholders, as you were saying, people from the Commission, people from different bodies, also other partners other companies. And I think this is a great way of getting engaged and shaping your industry, as you were saying.
Yeah, sure. Only to mention, we on digital scope and new technologies, only one organization cannot develop a technology alone. So it has to be done in collaborative manner, in sometimes open innovation programs. So facilitate the understanding, the conversation, the common language, the common requirements is fundamental in order to accelerate the positive impact and mitigate any negative impact that should be also considered, for instance, from an environmental point of view. Okay, so.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I see a hand raised by Knut. Knut, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ben, for this very interesting kind of collection of experiences you presented. Often it's argued that SMEs have no chance to really kind of enforce their interest in comparison to large companies. What is your experience there? Are you still able to really kind of bring in your preferences in the negotiation with the big players?
Yeah, sure. Well, sometimes the discussion are not so explicit, so it's not clear because in the composition of the expert on the discussion on daily meetings, obviously we are not coming from any other point of view, but it's true that when we are creating requirements, when we are discussing, it is fundamental, this point of view. And for instance, if we are proposing requirements for one concrete area, in case of even innovation management, the main discussion is if you are proposing a lot of requirements that really don't fit the resources one SMEs can access, because maybe they are thinking on big organizational structure that are outside of the small team of 10 persons. So we are discussing on leadership, on culture, on resources needed, on support the activities. At the end, it is where it's very important. Understand very well, first, the industry. So we need SMEs coming from the industry with deeper knowledge on what means this requirement on daily activities, on daily tasks, and also how we can balance between the different criteria, because standards should be agnostic. The standard cannot validate one concrete solution. So how to balance between what are the requirements that fits a small scale organization and large scale organization, obviously it's a complex task. But at the end, the decisions are made by majority of votes. So it is why so critical SMEs will be there to anticipate the obstacles on the implementation of these requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thanks a lot, Belen, and thanks, Knut, for the question. Let's maybe move to Andrea Ketcher to get a bit more of a complementary vision as well. I think quite a few things will have a similar story, let's say, but I think Andrea Ketcher has a bit more, has different business cases he wants to present to us on blockchain, on electronic signatures, on e-invoicing. So Andrea, whenever you want, and you want to share your screen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alex. So let me start sharing and just a few words of introduction. I will not talk about, not specifically about JTC19 and blockchain. On the other hand, I will speak about electronic signatures for a couple of reasons. The first that is Belen already introduced this topic, so I prefer, I think this is good to give some different views on different topics, so that maybe this is more interesting for so many people can find maybe something similar to their own direct business. And on the other hand, also because the EIDAS regulation is going to, well, has been a quite interesting regulation, and now we are close to have a new version of EIDAS, and very likely this will have an impact on everyone, on citizens, and small and medium enterprises, big companies, and so on. The new digital identity wallet is meant for each citizen, but also for legal persons, so for companies. And I think that especially SMEs will take benefit of this. So I think it will be an interesting topic to at least to mention. And indeed, as Belen said, there are so the possibility to participate is not depending on the site. There are a couple of keywords in, if not the last, the previous slide from Belen. One was about neutrality, one about consensus. Consensus is a key concept because, oh, sorry, it's not the right presentation. Sorry for this. Find the right one. Yeah, this one. Okay. So it's a black screen. Okay, now it should work. Sorry for this. So the concept of consensus is the key concept, because you see it here, the official definition from ISO that is somehow leading for this kind of concept. General agreement where there is no sustained opposition to substantial issues by any important part of the concerned interests in a process that seeks to take into account the views of all parties concerned. So, for example, small and medium enterprises in Europe, even if they have an observed role, in the committees, they are indeed one of the important part. So if there is no consensus from small and medium enterprises, then this can be an issue related to consensus. So there are mechanisms that this is one, but it's not the only one. There are a number of measures that ensure that participation is taken into account. I was mentioning about the EIDAS regulation. The EIDAS regulation with the new version is introducing an obligation for web browsers to recognize the European certificates. This is touching directly the business of the biggest company in the world. And they are starting to participate in our committees because we are touching their own core business. But I can say my word, even if I am just a single person, I am a consultant. My main profession is to be a consultant. So very is less than a micro enterprise, but I still can be heard. And if I say something that is of interest, of course I cannot drive lead the discussion and pretend to standardize my own technology, but for sure, if there is anything that is of interest to others, I can have the possibility to speak. And if the opposition is really has some ground, then consensus is not rigid. There is true that in the end the vote is on majority, but this is an exception. In my life in standardization, this happened very few times, and my experience is in general that if there is any sustained opposition, it's better to hear, and because typically there is some good reason for this opposition, and typically this is a very good way to improve standards. So yeah, what I would like to to point out here in this slide is that there are different roles. This has been already said by by Belen in her previous presentation, And my two slides are about the role of expert that I am running since 15 years in ETSI. Also because ETSI is quite different from the other organizations. So I think it's good to present also a bit on how ETSI works. And another is about my role in electronic invoicing as a chairman. So about, and a point I would like to mention here, of course, there is also the role of editor, but the editor typically is a very, well, has to be competent on the topic, but the main role is to consider and dispose the comments that are received. And the role is very well, very well defined in the rules of the standardization bodies. So the expert is typically the one that have more freedom in the sense that can express directly the opinion. And for a small or medium enterprise, this role can be quite effective because of the consensus rule. But on the other hand, there could be good reasons also to be a convener or even a chairperson. Typically, the conveners and the chairpersons has a specific role to ensure that the rules, the procedures are followed, and especially the consensus rule. So you should not think to be a leader of a standardization group and somehow have the same role of a CIO of a company. It's absolutely not the case. You should drive because you are authoritative, you have knowledge, and people follow you because you have something to say, and people want to hear what you say. And yeah, for my first case is about it's the electronic signatures and infrastructures group. As I said, it's quite a long experience there. Initially, my main goal there was to have information about my own consultant work. It was quite good in the end because indeed I had the chance to know some especially technical details about electronic signatures that were very useful for my work. But with starting from 2016, the scenario is quite different now because the EIDAS regulation promoted a lot of standardizations. In many fields, it's based on standard. In others, it's allowing the Commission to publish standards. This was not done, but now with the revision of the regulation, the Commission is mandated to reference standards. So standards had a growing importance in the context of electronic signatures and trust services. I became an SPS expert more or less at the same time, and I understood how to the different roles that the small and medium enterprises can have. Typically, the small and medium enterprise that participate are typically the provider of services, but in the role of representative of SMEs in general, my role was also to consider users of a technology. It's another important role, but in general, SMEs are somehow co-competitors, we can say, so cooperate and compete. So the two roles sometimes changes depending on the field. So by the way, this was my first experience in a context that became driven by policy, like the EIDAS. And also with this revision that is happening, also the innovative aspects are becoming more and more important because of the electronic ledger trust service, because of the digital wallet, electronic identification wallet, because of a number of new stuff that are introduced. And especially with the wallet, there is a chance that maybe not immediately, but in the long run, some blockchain technology will be used. So indeed, it's a field for small and medium enterprises to experiment and introduce innovation. But as said very well by Belen, it's very important that we have that small and medium enterprises take the lead. Otherwise, their innovation risks to become difficult to promote in market because of the name that is maybe not known. If standards somehow create a sort of democratic field where on one hand, everybody can speak. On the other hand, complying with standards allow also to small enterprises, maybe certification in some cases, allow small and medium enterprises to prove that they are compliant with standards and can participate in the market. And so this was a case where I didn't have any specific leadership role, but as said, in this committee, more and more are participating also very big, very corporates, multinational companies, and still the committee is working absolutely well. And as I said, ETSI is quite different from SEN. The main difference is that ETSI allows direct participation. So a small and medium enterprise can become a member of ETSI and participate directly for its own direct interest in the committees. This is different from SEN and ISO, where you have to participate at national level in a committee, and then the votes and the discussions are with the concept of delegation. So it's a two-layer model. And at the European level, there is a almost direct participation in working groups, but then the votes, the decisions are taken with the concept of delegation. So there is a national position and the vote is by nation, is not by companies. The second case is about electronic invoicing. So it's quite a traditional field. And here it's a good history of standardization, because when we started in, well, it was 10 years ago, more or less, we established the committee because there was a directive asking for a standard. The point is, okay, it's a directive, so public authorities typically have somehow let's say it's expected that public authorities have something to say for directives and legislation, but on the other hand, the field of electronic invoices was already, we can say, the field of large companies, and they tried to defend their position, their own standard, their own formats, and there was a long discussion, and it was very difficult to find consensus because of this divergence and the interest. There was mainly, on one hand, the interest of public authorities, the interest of large corporates that use typically different standards, and in the end, at least initially, there was not so much space for small and medium enterprises, but the result was very helpful for small and medium enterprises because the standard that has been chosen opened the possibility to innovate, and the market now is quite different. I can say that it's completely different now from 10 years ago, and I think that we played a quite important role here. And the history is not finished, because now the revision of the VAT directive is ongoing, and the standard that we created something like 8 years ago now is the basis for a big transformation in terms of electronic invoicing. So now electronic invoicing will become the default mechanism. So this means that in some countries it's already mandatory to issue electronic invoices, like in Italy, but it is spreading across Europe, in France, Germany, and many other countries. So this directive is trying to ensure harmonization, and the standard is the key point here. And as I said before, it's indeed it happened that small and medium enterprises' interest was taken into account, and there was a big advantage for who was participating in the committee, because had the possibility to have information to influence on one hand, and to have information and a competitive advantage on the others. This is just to summarize the main concept. So standards enable competition, and it's also an opportunity for end users, because with standard they have the possibility to choose knowing without having a deep knowledge on technicalities. Typically, standards are for minimum requirements, establish the basis for compliance, and to ensure interoperability and security, the minimum requirements for interoperability and security. Standards can support technology neutrality, effectiveness in supporting the objective of the digital transition, and environmental goals, like, for example, the case of the working group 2 that Belen is leading in JTC 19. And I think that for small and medium enterprises, even if they are not participating so much in directly, at least, in standardization bodies, this should be really seen as a competitive advantage. The scenario in 10 years from now changes dramatically. Most of the regulation now are based on standards, so indeed I think it's the right moment to move and to participate, because it will become more and more, let's say, not just an advantage, it became necessary for staying in the market. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andrea, and thanks for the nice, positive and strong final message. And for the overall very complimentary presentation to Belen's, both showing the incentives for participating as an SME, and also a bit more on the practicalities, the differences between the different roles, between being an expert, a convener, a chairperson. I think it's very clear. Maybe at this point, by a show of virtual hands, because unfortunately this is an online workshop and it was difficult to be all together for the afternoon, but we were wondering with Andrea, Belen and Knut, how many of the participating people today were engaged in standardization? And if not, perhaps, what are some of the concerns that you have? And maybe some questions you would like to ask to Andrea, to Belen, that may alleviate some of the concerns. So there may be financial, I know this can be the case sometimes, time consuming as well. Of course, SMEs don't have unlimited time to focus on different tasks. It can be knowledge as well. So I don't know if anybody at this point wants to take the floor and share some thoughts, some concerns, or some questions on what was raised by Andrea and Belen. I'll take this silence as a as an unsure positioning. Knut, do you want to say something maybe?
Yeah, maybe to kick this off. Andrea, very interesting experiences you should share with us. My question is, what about the funding? Because one could also have the attitude, okay, let's other write the standards. I behave as a free rider, but you are obviously heavily kind of invested regarding time and resources. What is your position about this, or do you have recommendations where to get the funding from?
Well, personally, I've been funded by SBS for electronic signatures infrastructure, so my case one. I have been funded by StandICT in the past. By the way, the standard I worked on has been published in August this year, even if the funding was something like a couple of years ago, but somehow, sometimes standardization organizations are not the most fast machine in the world, but yeah, there are some mechanism, but I think that it's a balance between, on one hand, have some funding because of course it costs money to travel, costs money to spend time on to work, but on the other hand, the advantage is also of the knowledge you have from from the work.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And
Knut.
if I may, I would also to comment or to complement Andrea's point of view, because I think that is critical for any, depending if you are SMEs, you are a consultant, standard allow the possibility to have access what is the state of the art in not only in the market, but also anticipate a bit of the future state of the art, what we can expect in the next month, in the next year. And it is, in my view, a fundamental source of knowledge, of opportunity for any SMEs and for any organization at the end. And I think, at least in my experience, lots of organizations have very clear this opportunity. This is why we see the number of a standard, or the stock of a standard we have at the ISO level are more than 11,000 standard, and the Sentinel level more than 12,000, most of them led by a large organization. So it is something that they know very well. Maybe it's a big challenge for all of us, engage, encourage, and also disseminate the work we are doing. So of course, financial support for this tax is, I would say this a must, is an interesting rewards, but it's not only the one, because also the funds are limited. And I think that the advantage more in terms of visibility, access to knowledge, but also partnerships, alliance with key stakeholders in the value chain, this complexity are fundamental rewards mechanisms for the contribution.
Thanks, Belen. Maybe going back to the practicalities, I was just wondering, what challenges did you face from going from being an expert in a working group to being a convener as a smaller player, as a small company, as a consultant? I imagine you had to build some sort of coalitions. You had to talk to different people to convince them to get to that point. What sort of challenges did you face, and especially how did you overcome them? What sort of tips would you give to some companies who are here today to overcome these challenges and to get to the positions you got to today?
Okay, maybe Andrea, do you prefer start and then?
This time is for you.
Okay. So I have to recognize that first, in my view, the awareness about the need to include SMEs perspective on standard development is increasing. Not only on technical side, it is in the strategic plan on innovation management, environmental management. Inclusion of a stakeholder now is under the, for instance, 2030 strategy on ISO, but also on SMEs. So there is an increasing awareness, and despite the discussion of we are in one concrete topic discussing, normally most of the experts are really open, because for instance consultants are thinking that the SMEs represent an important target market for them, and also because large organization at the end needs SMEs to develop innovation, for instance on open innovation programs. So it's not only there is of course daily tax some discussion about most probably what is the barrier we are creating of we are overboarding or no SMEs with some requirement, but there is a higher and an increasing awareness about the need to include SMEs, and the discussion at the end are between experts, honestly, not between large versus SMEs organization. At the end, the discussion is based on your capacity to influence, your capacity to negotiate with different experts in the discussion, but it is a qualified point when you said, hey, sorry, it is a significant barrier for SMEs. For the moment, fortunately,
the piece where what ID comes in is after the identity verification, they'll be issued a credential, and that credential needs to enter into the Cloud Central app, which is using Vault ID's web wallet backend, and then the student card issuance and the equivalency, the degree equivalency credentials. So the only thing from this tip that is important to Vault ID is being able to accept the credentials from these three steps. And obviously, we'll appreciate your help in finding the universities. And
yeah, I'm not sure this was for us.
No, it's not for us.
I've unmuted our colleague. Belen, I'll let you finish, and maybe Andrea, if you have a few words to add.
I would like to add very few words because
Yeah.
I see there are two hands raised, so I don't want to take time, but just to somehow complement the very last part of Belen discussion. I think networking is a key point for this, and my experience was that all the committees that started before the pandemic that had the chance to meet and people know each other, in the end continued to work even during the pandemic. The other committees had a lot more difficulties for this reason, because we are human beings in the end. Standardization is about human beings agreeing on something, in trying to simplify it at the maximum. So really, it's important to meet. The coffee break is more important than the formal session sometimes. So it's really important to have the chance to meet, to know the others, and that's where you increase your capacity and your knowledge in the end, because you have the chance to confront other people that have different views from different countries. Is really enriching, I think.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. I see Thomas Friesendal. I'm pretty sure I've pronounced this very badly, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. Well, I'm a StandICT fellow. I work in the ISO subcommittee 32 working group 2 on database languages. I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years, and before that in an open source movement that also focused on standardizing the graph database languages. Graph databases are evolving quickly, not least because of the evolution of AI. Many see graph databases as an integral part of an AI-based solution. And we are rolling out the GraphQL language standard early next year. That's fine. What I'm concerned about is that I see how the ISO work in those very large groups. The database language group is organized in the US as something called Insights. That particular DM32 group of US Insights has more than 100 participants, companies. All of them are somewhat bigger than the average European companies. They run by way of so-called expert groups. The US expert group for GraphQL language is around 30 active persons, companies. And all of those are, I'm pretty sure, all of those are vendors. To be a database vendor, you have to be incorporated in the US. That's where capital comes from, to database language development. So the European touch of this standard is very little, but there is an interesting side of it. And that is that one of the initiative companies was a little Swedish company called Neo4j, which, when this started around 2018, were, by all standards, a small to medium enterprise. Now they are incorporated in the US and have gotten several $100 million in capital. So my concern is, when I look at how it is actually done in the US, which is sort of the premise motor of this standardization development, I see one organization behind it, the Insights organization and its expert groups. In Europe, if we were to match that, we would have to get experts from 27 countries employed by or via 27 national bodies. So I've been thinking for myself, couldn't we in Europe do it in a more intelligent manner, set up some kind of organized expert group, special interest network, something, so that people who maybe not would spend time on actually participating in standards meetings could, come together in networking sessions and express their ideas and comments on what is going on. I think we could handle that, and we could be almost as effective as the American organizations. And one last thing to note is that the last 3 years, the big Chinese tech companies have arrived, like Alibaba, Ant Group, and so on. These companies are by no means small to medium enterprises. Alibaba, for instance, has more than 1 billion subscribers to their online payment systems. So let's try to take advantage of the structure that we are part of by 27 countries and see if we can get an organization to work like that. Just my thoughts.
Thomas. Interesting thoughts. Anybody from the speakers to react to this? I would insist to keep it quite short because we're coming to the end of the workshop. But maybe one reaction by either Knut, Belen, Andrea.
By the way, SC32 is the committee I mentioned before, that where I succeeded publishing the standard, but working group 2, not 3. So I know quite well the committee. I am, by the way, the only representative of Italy there. And yeah, it's indeed difficult because we have so few experts. In some fields, Europe is absent. You mentioned China. China is using ITU because ITU is, we can say, less SME friendly, is less SME friendly of the 3 international standard bodies. I think this is a problem because they're creating standard without, completely without Europe somehow. Mm-hmm. So there are many issues. It's not a perfect word, but indeed, if people want to work, I always see that they can participate. During the electronic invoicing preparation, we were more or less 100. So not so bad in the end. So Europe can express a good power if there is interest, if there is commitment.
I know a lot of people in Europe who have strong opinions on my specialties. They are there, but they're just too dispersed to interact.
Thanks a lot, Andrea, and thanks again, Thomas. Perhaps Lubna, I see your hand has been raised for quite a while. If you want to ask your ask your question in a few seconds before we close the workshop. If it's something more substantial, feel free to come towards me or any of the speakers by email or LinkedIn after the workshop, and we'll be happy to answer. But if you want to raise it quickly, perhaps, feel free.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll just be short and quick here. So I'm basically from the academic background. So I'm teaching cybersecurity standards, risk, law, and regulations, having a background of working on an industrial project where I mapped standards across IT, OT. My PhD is in cloud standardization. And then so I'm jumping across autonomous vehicle standardization now, healthcare, digital healthcare, a lot on the standards on different projects. Currently, I'm teaching industry, 2 big professional diplomas here, the sustainability PD and then the operation technology security PD. The biggest challenge is, like, all our programs are offered at evening and we teach industry straight away. Biggest challenges here, lack of understanding of regulations, lack of understanding of how to implement it, lack of understanding of mapping. Again, they would have standards, but they don't know how to map. So I'm teaching on a number of different programs. It's funded by UL at Work. And I saw that in the opening slide, there was something mentioned about, trainings and things. So probably a collaboration out there where we are teaching directly to industry, and that could be, some collaboration at that end, because we are I can see a common goal at that point to bridging the gap between industry. And yes, we do target SMEs at this point as well, because they're the most vulnerable ones. They're the ones who don't have the appetite for these cyber risks, and they suffer, they go out of market. So yeah, very quickly after this, maybe I'll catch up with you on LinkedIn or somewhere, or if there's a potential collaboration there, I'm happy to talk.
Indeed.
Thanks.
Please send me an email, because there's a new project on education coming up, and maybe we can collaborate also in this context, not only here via StandICT, but also with the other one.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sure. We'll stay in touch. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the question. And I was expecting Knut to be the first one to jump onto the question with his professor's hat, and I was not disappointed. We've come over the time of the workshop. Thanks again for attending. Final words on the overall event under which this was organized, the Meeting Standards Week by SBS. There's another bunch of events and workshops and seminars and webinars coming up until mid next week. So if you're interested in this intersection between SMEs and standards, feel free to look at their websites and see what they have coming up. A warm thank you again to our speakers, Belen, Andrea, Knut, and to all the people who participated today. And have a very nice afternoon, and see you next time. Thanks a lot, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.